hope everybody bears with me. This is my first Zoom meeting that I've chaired, and I'm conscious it's quite a big meeting and an important meeting. Just want to welcome everybody that's attending tonight's meeting, and I hope, like me, you're going to enjoy it. Just by way of a quick introduction, I'm Bernie Gallagher. I'm a recently retired Unison member after 40 years in the public sector. I've been a member of Unison since its formation and previously Nalgo and Newper. I'm also been an NEC member, branch secretary of Bolton Local Government Branch and the Vice President of Unison Northwest Region. I'm also a lifelong Labour Party member, and I'm currently sit on the Northwest Regional Board. Obviously tonight I'm speaking in a personal capacity. Our panel tonight all share a passion for the values of socialism and the integral link with trade unions to bring about social change. Tonight's meeting, titled Defining the Next Period of the Relationship, is a public meeting, and any questions that we're not able to answer this evening will be answered by email as soon as possible after the meeting. Our speakers' contributions will surely bring hope with their vision of a relationship between organised labour and the Labour Party, which serves the 99% and not the 1%. But I just want to give people a quick reminder of the roller coaster we've had over the last 3 decades or more. Following 18 years of Tory rule, the country was crying out for change. It wasn't the Labour manifesto alone in 1997 which won the election. It was ordinary people, people in workplaces talking to each other, encouraging people to vote Labour. Britain's 5 million public sector workers had hoped that the arrival of a Labour government would lead to an improvement in conditions. However, just 2 years into a Labour government, we witnessed Tony Blair addressing the British Venture Capitalist Association and getting a cheap applause for stating he still had the scars on his back from trying to get public sector workers to change. These provocative remarks continued with other new Labour MPs, and it is, I believe, no coincidence that between 1997 and 2010, 5 million voters abandoned Labour. Roll forward to June 2015, and a wave of excitement went around the Unison conference hall when it was discovered Jeremy Corbyn had got on the ballot paper for leader. I'd like to say that this excitement was shared with the Unison leadership, but this wasn't the case. And despite Jeremy's overwhelming win as leader of the Labour Party in September of that year, it felt like the Unison leadership had to be dragged kicking and screaming to support Jeremy Corbyn. There are thousands on the left who worked tirelessly in 2017 who were rightly concerned at the allegations in the leaked report which cast doubt on the commitment of staffers at Labour HQ to a Labour victory. A victory which was so close, a victory which I believe would have healed the divisions of Brexit and had the NHS in a better shape to tackle the pandemic. Nothing short of a full forensic investigation will do. Now, some of those points are going to be picked up by our speakers tonight. Our first speaker is John McDonnell. I'm conscious that lots of you do know John, but for those that don't, John is the Chancellor that we never had, or according to Owen Jones, the leader we never had, as he claims to have begged him to stand. But imitation is the best form of flattery, as Tory Chancellor Rishi Sunak copied many of the ideas which John and his shadow Treasury team developed to go in the manifestos of 2017 and 2019. Ironically, it was in response to a nurse who asked a question about nurses' pay during the 2017 election that Theresa May coined the phrase, "There's no such thing as a magic money tree." Well, this government has found a forest of magic money trees in its attempt to overcome the economic effects of coronavirus. The debate now is who will pay. So, John, I want to pass over to you to see if you can give us some clues how that will happen and perhaps some of your thoughts on the leaked document. Thanks, John.
Oh, thanks, Bernie. That's really good of you. Thanks a lot. Let me just make this point first of all, which we should always remind ourselves. The Labour Party was founded by the trade union movement. The Labour Party was founded, created, built, constructed, financed, organised for the trade union movement. It was trade unions that did it. So for a period, Bernie went over some of that period, and I can remember it in Bush as a party member, but also in Parliament, in terms of the Labour Party. I can remember, if you remember, when there's a Labour leadership that saw a relationship with the trade unions as some form of embarrassment. They were just sort of described as embarrassing relatives turning up at the wedding uninvited, that sort of thing. And that's why I think that's why during that period there was a breakdown of democracy within the party, and some of the most fundamental errors were committed. And I just give you one example, which it happened at a Unison group meeting in Parliament. I'm a member of Unison. I've been a member of Unison since the union was formed, and before that, I was a member of NUP, and I was a NUP shop steward. I can remember after '97, we had a Unison parliamentary group meeting. Individual unions have their parliamentary groups. They bring their MPs together in Parliament to discuss policies and organise on behalf of the union to make sure the union's got a good voice in Parliament and the Labour Party. And I can remember the first Unison meeting after '97, and Alan Milburn turned up. Can you remember him? Well, maybe best not, but he turned up. He became Chief Secretary of the Treasury when we went into government. And he was a fanatical advocate for PFIs, private finance initiatives, and privatisation. And I'll give you an example. We sat there, Jeremy was with me, we sat there and we listened to this and just said, one, this is privatisation of the worst sort, and two, it won't work. In the end, what you'll be doing is paying out money, will be ripped off, and at the end of the day, also some of those services that are funded by PFIs will be put in jeopardy. And here's the rub. In my constituency, we'd been campaigning for years to prevent the Tories of the Tory council closing down one of our secondary schools. We occupied it. We prevented them selling the land off by occupying it. And eventually we delayed by the occupation, and Labour got elected. And we thought, great, the cavalry are coming over the hill. We'll now claim the school back and rebuild it and have a fantastic school under Labour. Well, we did get a fantastic school. We reopened it, and I personally reopened it. But the governing body were told by Alan Milburn, you either have this as a PFI or you don't get any money at all. And the governors absolutely opposed the PFI, but had nowhere else to go. And we had a crumbling school, so they were forced into it. It was done by Jarvis, and a few years later, Jarvis were going into administration virtually. And again, we were close to occupying the building because a private company might have closed down the school. It was just a demonstration for me. It epitomizes all that was wrong by a decision made under New Labour when they just didn't listen to us in Unison, and they didn't listen to our members. And actually, as a union, we'd put together quite a detailed briefing on the consequences of PFI, but never really able to drive it through. And I think that was because there was an atmosphere really within our union at the time of we've got a Labour government and we shouldn't rock the boat. Well, by not rocking the boat, some of the most catastrophic decisions were made under New Labour that affected our members, and privatisation was one of them. So it was just an object lesson for me about, first of all, the union is one of those unions that was involved in the first development, foundation and development of the party itself, how the party turned its back on our union, and also because our union itself didn't exercise the power it should have done, wasn't forthright enough, didn't mobilise the members effectively, and as a result of that, to be honest, we suffered. Our members suffered as a result of privatisation, and at the end of the day also, the impact that had on wages and terms and conditions. Yes, we gained lots of gains, of course we did under New Labour, but there were too many losses as well. And it said for me really that when it comes down to it, our relationship between us and Labour has to be one of, we're all in the same movement, Labour and trade union movement together, but actually we as a union need to ensure that we're always voicing and representing our members, voicing their concerns, voicing their ambitions, their dreams, developing the policies that will benefit our members because they'll benefit the whole community, and then making sure that we exercise our influence in the Labour Party to make sure that becomes Labour Party policy, and then we go into government and implement it. And unfortunately, for a period of time, that hasn't been happening. And that's one of the reasons why I'm backing Paul. There's a whole multitude of reasons. I've known him years. He's a fantastic rank and file trade unionist. He's extremely competent negotiator. He's a really articulate voice. He's a member, he's a rank and file member who knows what it's like on the ground, but also in terms of what's happening in the Labour Party, we've worked together to try and ensure the accountability of the Labour Party to the union, but also to ensure that we advocate on behalf of the union within the Labour Party itself for sort of policies that will benefit our members. I'll just Bernie very quickly and say, look, the last 5 years since Jeremy was elected leader, with the support of Unison, but I have to say, Bernie's right. It took a bit of exercise of influence by our members determinedly to make sure the union did back Jeremy in the end, because certainly elements of leadership did everything to resist supporting Jeremy. And I remember at the time, because I was his campaign manager. Eventually, because the members were firm and absolutely sincere in their wishes, the union did, but the bureaucracy certainly didn't at the time. Let's be honest about it. Anyway, what then happened? We won the election. Everyone was surprised Jeremy won the leadership election. Halfway through the campaign, well, I was surprised, but halfway through the election, that leadership election campaign, we knew we were winning, and we knew we were winning because the policies we were advocating were they just resonated with people. And it resonated, especially with our members. It was quite remarkable, the number of Unison members who mobilised for us. And some of them who were not even party members joined the party or took up the opportunity to vote in that election, which was terrific. It was because the policies were, basic. They were the sort of things that Unison members have been saying to the party for quite a while, that if you want decent public services, you have to invest in them. If you want decent public services, you have to make sure that the people who deliver those services are properly respected and properly paid and have decent working conditions. But also, if you want to live in a society where people will have a decent standard of living and a good livelihood, you have to build things like council houses. You have to make sure people are properly housed. You have to make sure you invest in education. You don't load your kids with debt if they want to go to university. You make sure that basically you make sure that those public services are properly invested in, and we create a climate, I suppose, in which people have a sense of social solidarity again. We look after each other, we care for each other, and you cut through this neoliberal philosophy of greed and competition, dog eat dog. So I think that inspired people, and it inspired people because those are the ideas that were put to us by our own people, our own members in Unison itself. What happened when we tried to implement those policies? Well, you've seen what's happened in the leaked report. Look, the leaked report, we have to be careful of our language here. These are allegations that have been made. There's the Ford inquiry set up by Keir Starmer is now undertaking the inquiry. We'll see what comes out of that. But they are allegations. But I tell you, if they're true, it means a group of senior staff in Labour headquarters cost us an election in 2017, cost us a Labour government. Now, if you're a Labour member and, like all of us, you've worked hard to make sure that Labour comes together, builds the policy programme, you're knocking on the doors, delivering the leaflets, etc. In 2017, people worked themselves on the ground because they had hope. If you denied us that Labour government, I think it's unforgivable. I think actually it's morally indefensible because you then landed us in a situation where it was incredibly tough then after that, particularly because of the dominance of the Brexit issue. But what I found astounding about the leaked report, again, if it's true, was the sort of language that was used, the racist and misogynistic language that some of those senior staff allegedly used, and the way in which they were vicious in terms of, if it's true, against people like Diana. But I find that appalling. So I'm hoping from that report, investigation lessons will be learned. But I'll give you one, I won't go too long, but I'll just give you one example that for me, because I'd forget these things. But James Meadway reminded me, he wrote an article the other day. James Meadway was one of my economic advisors. He's brilliant. He's got a brilliant mind, there's no doubt about it. He was involved in setting up the New Economics Foundation. Young person, developing fresh ideas on the School of Economics, really knew his stuff. When I tried to appoint him, it was in the first month of being appointed Shadow Chancellor, the Labour Party blocked him because sometime in his past, I think he must have expressed support for, I think, SWP or some other party. And I said, well, actually, Peter Mandelson was a member of the Communist Party. You haven't blocked him. But anyway, they blocked them. They blocked and blocked and blocked because we never had control of the National Executive Committee then. And you know, one of the reasons we never had control of the National Executive Committee is because the Unison delegates onto the National Executive Committee consistently voted against Jeremy, and blocked any initiatives we were undertaking. I had to, at James Meadway, a union then volunteered to take him on and second him to me, and it took me 2 years to get him onto the books of the Labour Party as my economic advisor. It was the same at Community Organising. We tried to set up a community organising team to build our campaigning. It took us 2.5 years to get those staff in place because they were blocked at every opportunity by the bureaucratic hurdles put in their place. That's the sense of frustration I have, because if this report is true, I do want action against those people who prevented us having a Labour government. But the lesson for me in all of this is you cannot allow the bureaucrats to run an organisation and be unaccountable and undermine effectively the democratic wishes of our members. And if it's the same is true of the Labour Party, it's the same as true in trade unions. We need thoroughly democratic trade unions. And that's one of the reasons why I'm backing Paul. He's a rank and file member who's basically saying, I'm standing to give power back to our members, back to the branches, make sure they're properly funded, make sure they're respected, make sure the decisions they take are implemented. And I think that's the sort of General Secretary that we want. And then when Paul is elected General Secretary, I hope, we will then have on the Labour Party National Executive Committee and in all our dealings with the Labour Party, a union representation that's participating constructively within the party, developing policies, making sure we're campaigning on their behalf to get a Labour government, but holding them to democratic account so that they are respecting the wishes and the policies of our members. You know, it's not much, is it? It's a modern Greek invention, you know, democracy 2,000 years ago invented. What we need now is to ensure we have a thorough democratic union, and in that way, we can then join with others to make sure that we've got a thoroughly democratic Labour Party. Thanks, Bernie.
Okay, thanks, John, for that. Just picking up at one of the things that you said, John, there about the number of people that joined the Labour Party because of Jeremy Corbyn that weren't union members. And what was fantastic to see was Labour, yourself, Jeremy Corbyn, encouraging people to join a trade union. And trade union membership, I do believe, went up as a direct result of people saying join a trade union. So thanks for that, and thanks on Paul's behalf for his endorsement. I want to move quickly now over to Ken Loach. Most of you will know him, but Ken is a filmmaker. He's covered a myriad of social issues over many years, from homelessness in the powerful film Cathy Come Home to Kes, to I, Daniel Blake. He's an outspoken person about the issues which affect the working class in particular. He's recently called out Keir Starmer for the role he played as DPP in the fast-tracking of the extradition of Julian Assange. Ken's widely respected on the left of British politics for his honesty, his outspoken views, and we're really pleased to have him back Paul's campaign. Over to you, Ken.
Thanks, Bernie. And it's a real privilege to be here and to be able to support Paul and hearing John's words, which are, and particularly the last part about the allegations about the people who will work against us at the heart of our own party is truly appalling, if they're true. I'm very pleased to support Paul. I want to sort of go back a little bit and try to say something about why it's so important that we have both political trade unions, and those political trade unions have a political voice that gets to the heart of the reasons why working class people are exploited and consistently exploited and exploited with ever more inventive methods and what the changes are that we need at the heart of our society in order to put a stop to that and deliver a different, more dignified life. But I guess we're all familiar, aren't we, with the old image of the trade union leaders who, in their youthful days, seemed like firebrands, and in their later years take the ermine and go to the House of Lords. That was at one time was so frequent that the joke was that they, in their own persons, had managed the unity of the classes. They'd come in as working class figures, and they ended up as the establishment. And that's a very familiar figure we're all too used to. And of course, with that elevation socially went betrayal after betrayal after betrayal. And it goes back over a century since the Labour Party was founded, since the trade unions took their modern form. The Cripple Alliance of the early 20s, where the three powerful unions had a chance of making real change and back down. The general strike of 1926, when the miners were left stranded and the TUC caved in after a week. The collusion with Margaret Thatcher, where major unions sold jobs, allowed factories to close when many sections of their members were militant, prepared to fight, prepared to occupy factories. So in fact, we did a series of films that were called Questions of Leadership, and which were banned by Channel 4 because they didn't want those ideas heard. But the myth of the time was that the unions were led by rampant militants. In fact, the reverse was the case. And it was most of the leaders that actually kept the members tied and unable to organize across union to union to oppose the onslaught of Thatcherism. And then, of course, the consequence was when the miners struck, most unions, the big unions, had already sold their own members jobs, and there was no way they would back the miners. While at a grassroots level, of course, the miners got massive support. An interesting quotation from Nye Bevan, one of our great heroes, who said, and I think this is it's a very useful summary of the failure of trade unions to consistently defend their members. The trade union needs to consistently defend their members. And Bevan wrote, the trade union leadership have forged a revolutionary weapon without having a revolutionary intent. And of course, that's the critical, that's the essence of it. Because when you think about it, the trade unions, the working class organized, is a power that no one can subvert, because people at work can switch off the machines. They can close down production. They can stop the services. They have the power. We have the power in an organized way to stop the economy. And that's why unions are so important, beyond serving the interests of individual members, which of course is absolutely critical. But objectively, unions are strong. And yet, workers are exploited on poverty pay and insecure jobs. And that's the big question. Why is that? Are the union leaders just venal? Are they corrupt? Are they taking backhanders? Well, they may be, I don't know. But the central reason for it, I think, is a political failure. And it's the failure of social democracy, of right-wing social democracy, because they just don't get it. They don't get the irreconcilable conflict at the heart of our society, where the interests of employers are diametrically opposed to the interests of workers. The interests of employers are to increase their market share, to increase their profits, to increase their margin of profitability. How do they do that? Cheap raw materials, new technology that will dispense with workers, and are constantly finding new ways to exploit their labor force. And if one big employer does that, the others have to follow. Otherwise, they'll be priced out of the market. So that's their interest. And workers' interest, Tony Benn used to number these on the fingers of his hand, didn't he? The interests of the workers are security, security of home, security of work, security of income, taking care of when you're sick, education for your kids, a pension when you're old, and so on. Security in all aspects of life. And the two interests are irreconcilable. And that's the heart of it. And if we are to change that, trade unions need a political voice, because otherwise we're simply fighting one battle after another, but the overriding social circumstances stay the same. So we have to be political. Now, of course, and as John says, quite rightly says, the history of the Labour Party has not been to make those changes. The history of the Labour Party at its very best has been in favour of a mixed economy. But interesting, the NHS seems to me now the perfect example of the mixed economy. When everyone was employed directly by us, by the community, by the state, by us together on real trade union contracts, it worked well. It was paramount in the world. Now, partly privatized, the private companies introduce 0 hours, introduce insecure working conditions, introduce poverty pay. You can be sacked overnight, the service deteriorates. And of course, that is spreading like a disease throughout the NHS. And that's the mixed economy. That's the effect of the mixed economy. And so Jeremy's and John's program, as John said, we nearly should have won that election. That would have brought everyone in the NHS in the fullness of time back into, with a proper union contract, employed by the service itself. And that's the program. And that program needs to run throughout our economy and to be introduced stage by stage. And that's why the Labour Party, with that program, was beginning to change the terms of society that would allow workers and everyone to have lives of dignity and security. Who are our main enemies? Well, again, as John said, it's quite clear. When the BBC needed someone to attack Jeremy and John, they didn't need to find a Tory, they got a Labour MP off the back benches. So that's been our problem. And it's one that we have to deal with, because as right-wing social democrats, they are more fearful of radical change than they are of the real right wing, because the right-wing social democrats are for keeping the status quo and gathering the crumbs that come off the table. And we've seen, if these allegations are true, but other allegations too, that they will be ruthless. And so it's a massive struggle. It's a massive struggle, but one that we can win, because in the end, we have the power. In the end, we have the strength. And the attacks we're seeing continue in the Labour Party now. We have a small incident. I live in the southwest, where a mayoral shortlist was, all the CLPs were asked to nominate nominations for the mayoral shortlist. The left candidate won overwhelmingly, Leslie Mansour. There was then a subcommittee to choose the candidates, not the one we nominated. All the CLPs nominated, 2 right-wingers appeared, and they are going to fight the election on behalf of Labour. It's a small incident, but absolutely typical. Bureaucratic manipulation to remove the left. And we see it, I'm sure we're seeing it in instance after instance after instance throughout the party. So it's a big battle, and we have to fight it. And unity is fine, but you have to agree on the basic principles, and you have to have the moral commitment not to use bureaucratic manipulation, whether it's in a trade union, whether it's in the political party. So it's a long struggle, but it will be a great first step to see Paul Holmes as the General Secretary of Unison. Let's not have any fake left candidates. Go for the real one. Solidarity, Paul.
Thanks. Thanks, Ken, that was great. You're right, it is a struggle, but we're up for the struggle, and with the right candidate, we can win and we can make a difference. Right, so just bringing the right candidate in, Paul Holmes. Paul is branch secretary of Kirklees branch of Unison, based in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire. He's been a member of the NEC for over 13 years and is now standing for General Secretary of Unison as the only credible lay member who can win. Paul's an inspirational leader of his branch who will bring those qualities to headquarters, which he proposes to relocate out of London. His radical plan for Unison to double the percentage of resources to branches is already having an impact on the establishment, as the two other main contenders are shifting their rhetoric to the left. But it's his relationship with the Labour Party as a new General Secretary which Paul will have some influence, and which we want to hear about tonight. Just to say, I think this meeting may overrun. If people are okay with that, clearly if you're not, then leave the meeting. But we have got a number of questions. So if I just pass over to Paul, and then we'll go to questions from participants. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to speak tonight as Dennis Law, but Dennis Law's in the wash, and so I'm going to be speaking as Bobby Charlton tonight. Some of us who've seen the right films will understand that connotation, some of us won't. I joined the Labour Party. My name's Paul Holmes. I joined the Labour Party in Wakefield on a very, very historic occasion, the day after Margaret Thatcher got elected, because that was a working class response to a disappointment. And I, like most people, most working class people don't join things. They're enough on getting the living, bringing the families up, having social entertainment in the bit of time they've got left. So they don't join things. But I knew at that time that I had to join. And the reason that I knew I had to join is because I was working. And working teaches you more. The first year at work teaches you more than the 13 years at school ever taught me. And I grew up when people knocked on the doors of the houses in Wakefield. People didn't, if you said, do you vote Labour? People never responded yes. They said, no, we are Labour. They didn't say they voted Labour, they said they are Labour. It were part of the social consciousness. You know, I remember speaking to my mother, who growing up in the 1920s, who said everybody on her street, nobody was in the Labour Party, everybody knew the red flag. And I think that's really important to know about where you're coming from. I remember speaking to my great-grandma, who said to me when my great-granddad went off to, he was conscripted at 14 to fight in Africa in the British Army. And I said, it must have been a big shock leaving school at 14 and going abroad to fight in the army. And he said, Paul, he went down the pit when he was 9. And you need to understand your own history, don't you? And it's an history, it's not just based on class, it is obviously based on class, but it's based on gender. If you ask most people what most people did for a living in 1913, they would say coal mining, because there was 1 million coal miners in Britain in 1913. But that wasn't the biggest single occupation in Britain. The biggest single occupation in Britain in 1913 were domestic service. And 1.3 million women, including my great-grandma, did domestic service. Our background is that where it's from. And I'm going to bring us up to date in a minute. I've only 2 facts to give you. In 1948, when the National Health Service, this is a fact you don't often hear about because it sounds stupid. But in 1948, when the National Health Service was formed, they issued 15 million sets of false teeth in the first year. You can't believe that. What health conditions must the working people have been in for that to be operative? And when I talk to people of the generation in front of me, you might think this is stupid, but if you talk to women, they used to get as a present for their 21st birthday, all their teeth removed and a set of false teeth was a common birthday present, because that was the health situation that we used to live in. So when I left school in the late 70s, the last lesson I ever attended, the teacher told me, the general studies teacher or a Labour councillor, told me that by the year 2000, we'd have free electricity because of nuclear power, we'd have free petrol because of North Sea oil, we would have free gas because of North Sea gas, that we would be on, by the year 2000, a 5-hour week, and we'd be retiring at 40. And I knew people who left school with me who were frightened what they're going to do with the rest of the week. And that's an honest story. So when we turn now to where we are now, we've let down the generations that's followed us, because that were their aspirations. That were what Ken were talking about what we had within our grasp that we didn't defend. And what were interesting about the 2017 general election, I've got 2 daughters in the 20s, and about 5 or 6 weeks before the election, they started saying to me, Dad, everybody who's my age and younger is supporting Labour. It's changing. I said, I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. He says, it's happening. And I think if that general election had come 2 weeks later, we'd have won that general election, because we gave them the one thing that we've never given them before for the last previous 50 years. We gave them hope. We gave people aspirations of what their life could be like. And I understand what people are saying. I am Labour. The Labour Party is the vehicle which working class people in this country think is going to change their lives. And the people who trust that voted. We got 3 million extra votes in 2017 than we got in 2015. And I'll discuss later, because it might be one of the questions, what I think happened in 2019. But what I'm going to finish on is the trade unions formed the Labour Party. The Labour Party didn't form the trade unions. And that is about people sat under the tree at Tolpuddle, didn't sit there thinking, oh, I wonder if we ought to obey the law or not. The discussion was, the vote they took under that tree was, we're not working for less than 10 shillings a week. And in 1920, Big Bill Haywood, the American trade union leader, said, for every dollar a millionaire's got that they didn't earn, a working person who earned it didn't get it. And that is the whole basis of politics today in this country. There is loads of money. There's last year, the bankers were given £40 billion in bonuses, which is bigger than the Scotland budget. There is money, but it's in the Caribbean, it's in the Cayman Islands, it's in the Virgin Islands, and they're laughing at us. And our leaders, touch on what both Ken and John have said, our leaders, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here, I'll say they don't know that what we can achieve, but actually they're very comfortable. Comfort is the incredible thing. The reason people weren't in the Labour Party when I first joined it and before that was people felt we were going somewhere. People think you're improving. Working class people started going to university. We had facilities where people's teeth were actually looked after. And then suddenly somebody took a political economic decision in the 1970s that this country were going to get deindustrialised. That's what it were all about, the deindustrialisation of Britain, and turning it into a finance gig economy. And it's our job as the Labour Party to say what Oscar Wilde said. There's a lot of us in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And that's what Labour Party politics is about. It's not about incremental progression. They don't want us to have incremental progression. The biggest fear among some Labour politicians were the trebling of the Labour Party membership, because a socialist believes in big. I always believe in big. Big meetings, big turnouts, big discussions, not smoke-filled rooms and little discussions, because they're about looking after yourself. Big meetings when you're addressing 500, 600, 700 people are about looking after the people that you're addressing, because that's when working people get involved. I'll finish on this. When the miners' strike broke out, people have their memories of the miners' strike. I live in a mining town that had 25,000 miners in the beginning in 1984, in the first week of March. Now, working class people will understand this. The strike broke out on either a Monday or a Tuesday. No ballot, just a response to pit closures against the agreement. But in Wakefield that night, whether it was a Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember, it was like a Friday night. It was like a party. The clubs and pubs were packed because everybody knew they were doing something. We'd had pit closures between 79 and 81. We'd had skirmishes where the government backed off. But the union responded, and the members were out drinking, having a great time, because they were up for it. And that's the atmosphere we need to have. We need to have, when we elect a Labour government, in 1997, it was a feeling of relief when we got elected. What we should have had, like you see in France, in Italy, in Spain, we should have had people driving around in cars, beeping horns, cheering, waving flags, thinking that the life was going to change. And that's the atmosphere we need to create in this union. That our life, I agree with Picasso, I don't want to be, if they said to him, do you want to be a rich person with a rich lifestyle? He says, no, I want to be a working class lifestyle with a lot of money. And that is what the trade unions are about. They're about creating, I don't want to be in the House of Lords. I don't even want to go to London. I want to earn a decent wage, but I want everybody else to earn one as well. That's what the relationship with the Labour Party is about. It's saying to the Labour Party, make it so we get decent wages, so we get decent holidays, and we get a decent lifestyle. Not there's more people with ermine that used to be a trade union official. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Never lets us down. Right, questions now. Like I said earlier, we've had a number of questions submitted. We've tried to group them into various categories of similar type questions. The first question is from Steve Brown in Northumberland, and this is specifically to Paul. How will your General Secretaryship improve the links between the Labour Party and Unison?
Well, it'll provide the leadership, and it's about teamwork. When you elect the General Secretary, you're electing the captain, and you can remove the captain. But it'll change the situation. You know, for the vast majority of our members, when we nominated Keir Starmer in the General Secretary election, the leader of the Labour Party election, it was a complete and utter surprise and shock. Now, I don't mind us nominating Keir Starmer if every member's aware of the process and can take part in the process that's paying the Labour Party affiliation. There's no problem with that. Always go back to big. So the change would be, in my branch of Unison, we've got 200 Labour Party members. I only know 30 of them because you can't find out who are Labour Party members. Now, I don't want to be telling our members we're giving millions of pounds to the Labour Party and they may or may not help us. What I want to say is, them 200 Labour Party members are all delegates to their constituency or their regional Labour Party or the National Delegate Conference, and they're going to go into that meeting and represent you. Not some MP, and this is greatest respect to John McDonnell, that there's 3 or 4 of us going to meet somewhere in a room and see how we can help them with reselection. That's not what it's about. It's to say to people who want to stand for election and want the support of this union, we will give you that support, but you need to meet these policies. You need to tell us what your plan is to meet them policies, and we'll support the person who most supports our policies, but also we'll be electing delegates to the, and we've got delegates, we've got members in Kirklees Unison in 36 constituencies. And in them 36 constituencies, our Labour Party affiliation should be saying what we want from our Labour Party candidate. Because Labour can win every seat. If you can win Kensington and Chelsea, and you can win Canterbury, you can win any seat. And there's every seat, even the seats that's full of posh people. Somebody's sweeping the road, somebody's doing domestic service, somebody's repairing washing machines. The working classes make up the majority of 99% of the constituents in this country. And the relationship should change, because we're saying to our members, it's not a passive relationship with the Labour Party. We're not going to give them £3 million. We're going to spend £3 million on making sure you'll give us decent wages, terms and conditions of pensions. And that's the relationship.
Thanks, Paul. Well put. Okay, our next question is from Julie Walker in Birkenhead. How do you see the relationship between the trade unions and the new Labour leadership team? I'm going to start with John, please, if you want to address that.
Yep, okay. Well, we've got to create that relationship now, and with the election of a new General Secretary, and I hope the election of Paul will be able to create that relationship. And I think we've got to be honest with whoever's the leader that we represent as a union. One of the largest, if not the largest, affiliate to the Labour Party. Our members have told us as a union exactly the sort of policies that they want to see implemented by a Labour government. And these are the policies that we expect Labour to adopt. And then when they campaign for election, promote them, and when they get elected, implement them. And then have an honest discussion. You know, what is, if we have a disagreement about a policy option, that's fair enough. You can have disagreements, so let's have an honest discussion about what we disagree upon, and let's negotiate as best we can some form of way forward. It's as simple as that. That's all we want. And it's the point that Paul keeps making. When there's an issue that's got to be decided, it should be the members that decide. So within our union, it should be the members who decide the policies, and we've got to make sure that we've got the structures to enable that to happen, and we properly resource those structures. The best form, as far as I can see, is the way in which branch is organised and that policies get fed in, and we have our congress, that conference, and we abide by those policies. Well, the Labour Party, I think, has got to reflect those sort of traditional, yes, but actually they're historically tested as properly democratic processes. So whatever relationship we have with Keir Starmer, it's got to be on that democratic basis. But, you know, it's the point that Paul keeps making. It's not the leaders that count at the end of the day. We've got to ensure it's the members that count. And what we've got to do is keep building our membership of the Labour Party, making sure that they participate thoroughly within the Labour Party's structures, and making sure that they're actually then, as a result of that, ensuring the Labour Party is fully democratic. And I think we should be honest with Keir and others, that will be the mission that Paul has when he's elected General Secretary, to ensure that we have a democratic Labour Party that's democratically accountable to our union. And where there are disagreements on policy, they will be determined by the members themselves. You know, it's an honest relationship, and it's the one on which our party was founded by our trade unions to enable that to happen. The key issue for us is making sure that we've got those mechanisms, because in our own union and the Labour Party as well, it has become bureaucratised, as I've said before. And what happens then is exactly as happened in many times in the past, that the leadership becomes completely unaccountable to the membership and completely has their own agenda rather than following what the members want. And as a result of that, I think some catastrophic mistakes are made. As an aside, just quickly, Ken mentioned the history of the trade union movement. I mentioned a range of different historical incidences where that breakdown of democracy took place. And as a result of that, our members were sold short, and our movement was. And he forgot to mention, I think one of his best series of films is one called Days of Hope, which is about the 1926 general strike. And if you can get your hands on it, it's brilliant. Sorry about that, it was an advert, but I just think it's such a good educational film. It really teaches the lesson of the general strike and how trade unions, and TUC in particular, can operate when they're no longer accountable to their members.
Thanks, John, for that. Nothing wrong with a good plug for a good film, educational film. Ken, do you want to address that question as well? So that's about the relationship with the trade unions and the new Labour leadership team.
Yes, very quickly. Thanks, John. It was the BBC showed it once and it didn't show it again. Not surprising. And to say to Paul, very pleased to see he's performing as Bobby Charlton, but he'd need to be the fair-haired, slightly balding Bobby Charlton. He doesn't quite qualify on those counts. Look, John said, you know, what I would say. I think maybe add one thing. I think we need to have some questions for Keir Starmer and his team. We've been through, and are still going through, the most extraordinary health crisis. I haven't heard, I follow these things reasonably closely. I haven't heard the daily, what I think should have been the regular demands for the restoration of the health service. The health service has been under extraordinary pressure. It's been failed time and time again by Johnson and his cronies. The big question is, why is the National Health Service in such a bad state? And surely the question should have been over and over again, end the privatisation. The care service, absolutely on the rack. No mention of the 0 hours, no mention of the many care workers not being paid for their travel. Basic union issues not being put by the Labour leadership. I mean, there are many other issues as well, but they need to be questioned about. We need to put those questions time and time again, so they have to speak up. Why has the Labour leadership not spoken very crisply and clearly to explain why the National Health Service has been started this pandemic on the back foot? Why is it under pressure? And we know the answer. Let's hear Keir Starmer let him articulate it.
Thanks, Ken, for that. Yeah, I think the reason that the current leadership don't put those questions forward is because they don't really understand what's going on in the care sector in the National Health Service, as the likes of John and Jeremy and others did. Paul, do you want to answer the same question, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't want to criticise anybody else. What I do is put my own few points forward. But I sometimes get a bit fed up of hearing people talking about, sentimentally, about where they used to live 50 years ago. Because I live where I used to live 50 years ago. I live within 100 yards of where I lived 50 years ago. And what we've got to give is the honest stories of how people are leading their lives. And they're not being given. I've known Angela Rayner a lot of years. She was a Unison official for many years. And I don't know Keir Starmer. But my question is, and there's two parts to it really, if you join an allotment society or a pigeon fanciers club or a football team or a sewing circle, whatever it is you join, and you say you're the chairman or the secretary or the chairperson or the secretary, somebody says, well, how did you get to be that then? Who elected you? Every working class organisation says that. That's what and if you don't like what you're doing representing the allotment society or the sewing circle, they get rid of you. Okay. And Ken couldn't be more right about the health service. I don't normally tell personal stories about myself, but I'm waiting for the cataract operation at the minute. It's been delayed by COVID. I'm completely comfortable with that. But I won't use anything but the National Health Service. And it's difficult. I went to the GP, which is a private practice, and I said, oh, I want to go and see somebody at the hospital about my cataracts. He said, oh, well, it's better to send you to Specsavers. So I went to Specsavers, and they said, oh, we've got this clinic near where you live. It's an NHS, it's a clinic, and you can have it done within 2 to 3 weeks. So I thought, well, I've never heard of that clinic. And anyway, I went to have a look at it, and I thought, well, who owns that then? And oh no, they said it's NHS. It's definitely NHS. And it took me the best part of 2 days to find out that it were a private clinic that won an NHS contract to do eye surgery. And I said, I rang up and said, don't want it. She didn't go on in 2 or 3 weeks. I said, I'm a lot of things, but I'm not an hypocrite. And 7 months later, I'm waiting for that operation. But I've been referred by a government-funded GP to a Specsavers, to a clinic that did the operation on behalf of the NHS. And that is the problem. People said to me, because part of the manifesto to be, I believe, General Secretary of Unison is £15 a week minimum wage. Now, people tell me you can't fill vacancies in private care homes. I tell you what, you could fill them on £15 a week. Fill them no end. And we've got to be saying to the leaders, the relationship's got to be, what you're going to do for us, we've elected you. That's always it. It's Tony Benn's point, isn't it? Tony Benn's point. What power have you got? On whose behalf do you exercise it? Who gave you it? How did you get there? And how can we get rid of you? And that is nothing. Every union branch secretary knows that. And that's the relationship. We're verging on a national government at the moment with the lack of opposition to what's going on. And we've got to say, the people speaking on our behalf, I know people are worried. Over 600 people have died in the care and National Health Services. I know people are treading carefully about issues like that. It's a very sensitive issue. But we've got to be saying to the government, you're a joke. Because that's what people are saying on the streets, that they're a joke. And we need to be saying that. So I'd be saying to Keir Starmer, look, we've got to get stuck into the ribs. We have the popular policies to solve what's going on. Who would have thought at the beginning of this year If I'd have asked anybody in my street what the big issues would have been this year, everybody would have said Brexit and the Brexit negotiations. Who would have said the A-level results? Who would have said Black Lives Matter? Who would have said that it would be coronavirus or nurses' pay? It's a moving feast and we've got to move with it.
Thanks, Paul, for that. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. The next question is from Michael Horgan in Liverpool. What is your view on Unison's inaction on the revelations in the Labour Leaks report? I don't know whether John or Ken do want to comment on this, or whether that's one just for Paul. John, Ken, it's because it's specifically about Unison's inaction.
Well, I'll just say, sorry, Ken. Yeah. I'll just say this. I expected our union to be more vociferous about it. I expected, to be honest, the revelations were so shocking, and again, if true, but they were so shocking, I did expect our union to really have a strong reaction because of what a Labour government in 2017 could have been for our members. So when that report was leaked, and as I say, if it's true, I did expect, to be honest, I expected a bit of anger to be expressed by our representatives, because since then it meant another from 2017 to 2020, it meant another round of austerity, our members' wages still being frozen or held back, still below the level of the banking crisis 10 years ago, and more privatisation, billions of pounds going to privatisation. So I did expect a bit more anger to be expressed, really, because, to be honest, if it is true, if it is, I am bloody angry myself, to be honest. So I expected a bit more reaction.
Yeah, as did.
Well, I will say one very quick thing, if I may, Bernie.
Yeah.
Really quickly. I agree with John, of course. I mean, they were disgusting. They were disgusting. And if they were accurately represented, as in the CLPs and the constituency parties, we've been told you can't discuss this. You can't discuss it. It's not, we're not competent to discuss it. Meanwhile, people get large sums of money paid to them. Now, for the members to be told they can't discuss this, one of the most, I can't think of a more shocking set of disclosures, is a way of dampening down people's anger. And of course, we know several people who have left because they said, well, what's the point? The leadership don't care. The leadership appear to be protecting those people who have attacked us, allegedly attacked us, and we can't discuss it. So you could interpret this, if you were so minded, as a political way of diffusing what should be an intolerable situation. And again, it's the kind of bureaucratic maneuver, if that were the case, that we should be absolutely against. But let's keep that disgust alive, because let's keep that anger alive, because without it, we can't purge the party of this appalling behaviour.
Thanks, Ken. Paul?
Yeah, Chair, unlike most people, I've read the report. I read it from page 1 to page 851. And one thing in it, obviously, if it's true, what way have I got knowing it's true? Well, I think most of us would say everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but there's something there to investigate. That would be the view of most people, particularly when it's in the public domain, when so many people have read it. So the first thing that's in it, everything's preempted by, if it's true, is the attitude towards the Labour Party leadership in the general election. Now that in and of itself is a political disappointment about people's lives and people's aspirations and what could have happened in 2017 and how it would have altered the last 12 months. That's the first thing. Some people, depending on the political view, would have expected or not expected that, depending on their knowledge of the individuals involved. But the other two things in there are unbelievable to most people if they're true. The first one is stuff that should have been investigated that wasn't. You know, we'd have all have our own views about who said what about who, but the stuff that's reported in there, if it's true, that were on social media, that were said in writing, they're not conversations at CLPs or PLPs. They're actually put in people's Facebook or on people's emails. And the third thing is the level of debate and discussion that involved misogyny and racism. You would be instantly dismissed in the workplace if you said some of the stuff that was allegedly said in that report. It isn't expected of people who some people look down on. But for people who spend their lives parading about this country, seeing how people should behave, and then behave in private like that, if it's true, it would make people physically sick. But what it will also do is what I think we don't want it to do, is we don't want people to leave the party. Who wants to leave? When you're fighting a battle, who wants part of your army to leave because they're disgusted with you? What? Some people want the party to be smaller. I want it to be 3 times as big. But the stuff that's in there, the racist stuff, the contact in the newspapers, if it's true, can only be fought by decisive action. It can only be fought by that. Because I'm embarrassed to be a member of the Labour Party, if that's true. And I shouldn't be embarrassed. I should be proud, and other people shouldn't be there if that's what they've done.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Can you stay there? Because I just want to, I'm conscious of the time and we've already overrun, but I just want to put 2 other points to you that I think are questions that are important. And if I can put them both together, and if you could answer them as perhaps as succinctly as you can. Jenny from East Sussex, should Unison support mandatory reselection of MPs? And Joe Sucksmith in Gloucestershire, would you potentially be supportive of disaffiliating from the Labour Party in the event Labour under Starmer didn't stick to the left policies developed under Corbyn?
Well, the first part of the question is very short. Without mandatory selection, it's very difficult to change anything. You know, and mandatory selection is, most councillors and Unison branch secretaries would know that they face that every year or every 3 years or every 4 years. It's just how it is. Even Parliament, for its feudal sort of background, the fact that 2/3 of it isn't elected, when I include the monarchy in the 2/3 of that, even Parliament accepts that the 1/3 that is elected can't last for more than 5 years. Even Parliament thinks that. Every single working person would think if you're elected to a position, there's a period where you've got to be elected again or see elected again. So I fully 100% support mandatory selection, always have done, and I support it for myself. Me first, I should be mandatory selected as branch secretary every year, and I am. The second part is disaffiliation would be a signal of defeat. What it would say was, we tried, but we couldn't do anything. That's what it would show. And it's not, I know it's an old cliche, but it's called a struggle for a reason. It's a struggle. You know, my grandparents and my great-grandparents would think, they wouldn't imagine the life we were living in the 1970s, that we didn't think were all special. Nobody in the 1970s were wondering about thinking, this is heaven on earth. Nobody thought that. They were still wanting improvements. You know, people wanted to retire healthily at 50. The working week started to get smaller in the 70s. My working week's been the same for the 40 years I've been at work. It's been 37 hours. Yet the production of workers has gone 3, 4, 10 times what it was. So for me, I would want to treble the membership in the Labour Party if it's not doing what we want it to do, because that's how you win. And I'll leave you at this point on this one. Small doesn't benefit anybody. Big always benefits.
Thanks, Paul. I'm aware people are not leaving the meeting, so I'm going to take Chair's licence here and just put in a final question. This is from Laurie Hannon in Dundee. What do you think is the biggest issue that's holding back the Labour Party currently? And John, if I can take you, John, on that.
I don't think the Labour Party necessarily has to be held back. I don't think it has. I think we're in. I'm optimistic. It's been pretty tough this last 10 months. The election result was devastating, really devastating for most of us. Then we went into the pandemic, and it's been a tragedy for so many families and a lot of human suffering. But what's come out of that, actually, I think, is a fundamental debate, discussion, reevaluation of people's values, what they see, what they want in society. And I keep saying to people have realized just how much we care for each other. Actually, there's so much been done of mutual aid, people supporting one another. It isn't just clapping for our members in the NHS and social care and elsewhere. There's a lot of recognition about what's decent in society, and not just about how we care for each other, but we need each other. And all those things that we've been advocating over the years about solidarity and working together, making sure we have governments and local councils that are providing the public services that we need, but providing those public services on the basis of making sure the workers in those services are properly paid and properly respected. I just think our time is coming because we've convinced people and won all the arguments now. So I think I'm really optimistic we can go forward. But one thing we've got to shake off is this isn't about one individual, Keir Starmer or whoever's leader. It was never about just Jeremy or me. It was about us as a movement. And the one thing about the Paul's point that he keeps making, we now have, we're one of the largest unions, if not the biggest affiliate to the Labour Party. We've still got 500,000 members in the Labour Party. We're a massive social movement. There's Paul's point about being big. We are big. And I think if we can exercise our influence, both within the Labour Party and the overall trade union Labour movement, we can then exercise our influence within society as well. And people, I think, want to hear our message. So I don't think we're being held back. It's down to we all have a responsibility on our shoulders now to recognise that we're a big social movement. So nothing should hold us back. And when there are people going into struggle, when they plant the flag and say, we're campaigning on this issue, we want support, automatically we should support. So, for example, when the renters now, who've been campaigning brilliantly against evictions, want our support, we support them. When the NHS workers, our members, are calling for support and against privatisation, we support them. When Black Lives Matter demonstrations take place, we support them. When British Airways are sacking my constituents, we support fellow unions like Unite in their campaigns to protect jobs and working conditions. And I think that sense of social solidarity now is spread right the way across society. I think people have learned lessons since the last election and as a result the pandemic. So nothing should hold us back. And I don't think we should allow it to hold us back in this union either. That's why I say to people, elect Paul and we'll have a general secretary who actually does enable the movement and our union to mobilise effectively.
Thanks, John. Ken, do you agree with that? Is issues holding the Labour Party back currently?
Yes, I share John's optimism, but it's a struggle. I have to say, I think the big issue is the struggle for leadership, because these things are true. I mean, during the pandemic, the sense of mutual support, the good elements in society come to the fore. People are good neighbours again. People talk to each other in a way they often used not to because we've been locked down. And many good things have come out. But of course, we need these articulated and united into a programme in order to achieve change. Jeremy and John did that, and while John modestly says, of course, it's not about him and Jeremy, of course it was. It was, because people were inspired by you, and people were inspired by that programme. Yes, the elements are in society to be inspired again. And maybe that possibility is renewed through what's happened with COVID and what's happened with the debacle of this atrocious government. But it has to be articulated, it has to be organised. And we have the problem with the media. only reflecting the right-wing aspects of the labour movement, or mainly reflecting those aspects. So we face that challenge, and we face the challenge of having a leadership that will articulate our strengths, our possibilities, and and what we can achieve together. So it is a struggle, and the struggle for leadership in Unison is key. And again, but absolutely with John, that's why, and as I said at the beginning, Paul's election could really be a game changer in this massive union, going where its members are amongst those of the most exploited in the country. A leader that actually states their case with the clarity and the strength that Paul does, and follows it through on with the principles that he's putting forward. That could be a real beacon, along with the one or two really strong trade union leaders we have. But Paul's position could be absolutely a game changer. So it's significant for us all. Because I said the other night, if Paul wins, we all win. You know, so this is really important. And then our optimism will really take fire. So good luck.
Thanks, Ken. Okay. Paul, can I ask you to answer that question, but also to make any concluding remarks that you want to say? So the floor is yours, and then we'll wind up the meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ken couldn't be more right. Actually, I don't want to be the General Secretary of Unison, and I don't trust people who do, but I think somebody's got to do it. And the purpose of leadership is not some hero to come down from the hills. That's not the purpose of it. It's to give articulation and confidence to the people you're the General Secretary of. And sometimes I'm nearly in tears. But if I go to a joint trade union meeting, say there's a rally about a strike or whatever, and I hear some of our members sometimes of our branch, and I wouldn't make this up, say, you might think this speaker's good, but wait till our lad gets up there. And then people have got some aspirations in what I'm going to do with that meeting. And it's a tremendous responsibility, absolutely tremendous responsibility. And there's a scene in The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist. If I had one wish about education in this country, you could read whatever book you wanted, but I wish that everybody was supplied with a copy of The Ragged Trouser Philanthropist. And there's a scene in that where they're in the square, and the Tory party and the Liberal Party are addressing the electorate in public meetings where they're all there at the same time. And all they're saying is the Tory and the Liberals. I think the Liberals call Council Weekly, if I remember rightly. Yeah. It is actually, they're all sat there, the backside's hanging out the trousers, they've got no money, they've got 2 agencies to rub together. And the Tory and the Liberal candidate is saying, if Labour ever get in, you'll be living in poverty. And it's such a good point, because they're all sat there in poverty, listening to the dangers of living in poverty. And I finish on this because I think it answers the question and it adequately sums up where I think we need to be going. If it seems like a cheap point, it probably is. I were in a pub once in London, not an unusual occurrence, and it were after the Bob Dylan concert. I'm in this pub and I'm stood at the bar, and it's local election night, and the results are coming on. Pubs didn't shut till 12. The results are coming on the telly, and me and my mate Nigel, who were coal miner then from Wakefield, we're discussing the results, maybe an hour and a half. And this bloke behind the bar, an Australian, says at the end of the night, he says, I hope you don't mind me asking you this, he says, but I've been listening to you all night, it's been really interesting. And he says, what? So he said to Nigel, he says, well, what will it be like under socialism? Because it sounds to me something like nobody's ever discussed with me before. You're Australian. We're quite interested in Australian being over here. And my mate Nigel says, well, this is the best way I can describe it to you. He says, under socialism, all the pumps will be at this side of the bar. So the bloke behind the counter says, well, I'll be unemployed, I'll have nothing to do. He says, kid, you'll be changing barrels like there's no tomorrow. And that's the key to it all. You're going to be better off. You know, the Ragged Trouser Philanthropy story, the bar in London story, socialism isn't about us being some sort of saintly people who want to come down to people who haven't got much and give them a couple of pennies. It's about how we can all live better. All of us can live better. And if you don't give them that aspiration, that's what it's about. Aspiration. Let's get his minds out the gutter and look at the stars. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. That was a brilliant finish. I think 2 words can sum up this meeting: optimism, but it's a struggle that we're up for. I want to thank everybody that sent questions in. Like I said, we've not got round to answering all of those, and there is a commitment that those questions will be answered by email. What happens now, we want people to get involved in the campaign if you're not already involved. We've got all your email addresses, so an email will be coming out with the next events. There are 5 more of these type of meetings across the regions and sectors. The first one being next Monday, which is the local government sector meeting, which should be of great interest given the significance of Paul winning the nomination of the local government service group. So that just concludes, just to thank everyone. Thanks very much, John and Ken, for supporting Paul's campaign, and thanks, Paul, so much for your inspirational answers to the questions, and we're all behind you. Thanks, everyone.